welcome to everyone for this webinar today, where we're going to be sharing some insights into the new, fairly recently government commissioned task force looking at improving socio-economic diversity at a senior level across financial and professional services. The format for today's session, we're going to do a bit of an intro from me and kind of set the scene and just share a little bit about what's the purpose of the task force, how it's been structured, and what the plans are going forward. I'm delighted that then we will have Damien from Santander, and I'll get him to do an introduction to himself in just a moment. But he's going to be, he and one of the senior leadership team at Santander are involved in the task force. So delighted they can come and share a little bit about why they're involved and their journey so far in and around this. We're then going to give you an opportunity to ask some questions that you might have around the task force. And then we're going to have a breakout session where we're going to look at some of the key areas that we plan to be tackling within the task force, and to give you an opportunity to discuss that with your peers as part of this session today. I'll be facilitating one group and Damien will be facilitating another for us to have that discussion. And then we'll kind of sum up with some of the key themes that have come from the, particularly from the breakout discussions that we'll have had as part of this session. So that's the plan. Damien, do you want to do a very quick 20-second intro to you ahead of your session?
Thanks, Simon. Hi, everyone, and good afternoon. It's great to be joining you all on the session today. I'm Damien Schubert, so I'm the Head of Culture, Inclusion and Experience at Santander, and as Simon said, working alongside as part of the task force and working group as well. For this working group, I'm really excited to share some of the insights that we've been taking at Santander, but particularly around the focus and the lens on progression at senior levels. But thank you, Simon.
Fantastic, great. So that being the case, let's get started. So just very briefly, all of you will have heard of Santander, I'm sure, but not as many potentially about MyKindaFuture. So MyKindaFuture, we're a mission-locked social enterprise. And our mission is about supporting underrepresented talent to get into work, and then with that new underrepresented talent, but also existing underrepresented talent, to support them to progress within work. And an increasingly critical part of how we are delivering those outcomes for our clients is through our technology platform. So we're increasingly a technology business that leverages the very best of technology to support, as I say, underrepresented talent get into work and progress in work. And we work with lots of different organisations across lots of different sectors across the UK. So why is the task force needed, and why are we talking about this today? So the task force was created on the back of some research that was undertaken by the Bridge Group. And it was commissioned by the City of London Corporation, and a number of really great and powerful insights came from the report that was undertaken. And you can see some of the kind of key data and insights that came about as a result of the research. I think one of the key things for me is if you come from a lower socioeconomic background, it takes you 25% as long to progress in this sector, despite any evidence of no poor performance. So you perform just as well as everyone else, but simply because you become from a lower socioeconomic background, you progress 25% as long. And looking at the more broadly at the issue of intersectionality, if you're also Black and come from a lower socioeconomic background, it takes you 32% as long. This is an issue for lots of different reasons. One, just the straight inequality and unfairness of it for those individuals. But also there's a huge wealth of untapped talent within organizations that is not being maximized because of this unfairness around progression. And the other thing is, over the last 7 to 10 years, there's been a growing amount of good work done to bring more diverse talent into organizations, whether that's through early talent programs, whether that's through returner programs, or just more generally through experienced hires. A real focus from organizations to attract and hire more diverse talent. But if that diverse talent is coming into organizations and simply because they come from a lower socioeconomic background and not progressing as fast, they're going to exit. So best case scenario, you've got a leaky bucket with all the great work you're doing to bring more diverse talent in. And worst case scenario, it's wasted effort, because that diverse talent you're bringing in is not progressing. And of course, we all know that the key drivers behind particularly having greater diversity at all levels in the organization, but specifically at senior level, that drives the culture and the direction and the performance of the organization. So for all those reasons, on the back of the Bridge Group report, the government commissioned this task force. So it's been commissioned by HM Treasury and BEIS, so Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, to set this task force up to specifically improve socio-economic diversity at a senior level within the sector, but with the focus on progression and retention. So we're not focusing in this task force on attracting and recruiting more diverse talent, because work is being done. It's still a lot of work to be done, but progress is being made. But very little has been done around progression and retention, particularly from a low socioeconomic perspective, and that is our very clear focus with the task force. There are three, in terms of how the task force has been structured, there are 3 work streams. So work stream 1 is looking specifically at industry consultation and the role of regulation. And that work stream, the co-chair is Sandra Wallace, so from the Social and Mobility Commission, and the delivery partner is a lady by the name of Kay, and she's a partner at Deloitte. Work stream 3 is looking at productivity analysis, or the business case for this greater level of socioeconomic diversity at a senior level. And the co-chair for that is Andy Haldane, and Andy is the chief economist for the Bank of England. And the delivery partner for that work stream is a gentleman by the name of Barry, and he is a partner at PwC. And the final work stream 2, is tasked with creating some form of membership body, peer group, safe space that can help drive this change. So share best practice, data benchmarking, and just be a safe space for organizations to come to address this very significant challenge and obviously opportunity by getting this right that this offers. And the co-chair for that work stream is Vincent Keaveney, and Vincent Keaveney is a senior alderman for the City of London, and come November, all being well, he will be Lord Mayor of London. And the delivery partner for that work stream is MyKindaFuture, led by me, and that's obviously one of the reasons we're running this session today, because of our close involvement with the task force and what it's seeking to do. Each of those work streams that you can see has 10 task force members, so per work stream, and they are senior level industry leaders, so CEOs, MDs, managing partners across the sector, to help shape the strategy and direction of the task force. Each work stream has a working group of 10 subject matter experts, and Damien is one of those working group members for work stream 2, so working with me, which I'm really excited about. And plus we have an advisory board, because we were overwhelmed by the volume of people wanting to be involved in the task force, which is a really great sign. And so we've created an advisory board so that we can take advantage of all that fantastic senior level support we've had from across the sector to drive what we are seeking to do. The final couple of points I'd like to make is, though the task force, the government has commissioned the City of London Corporation to set up and run the task force. It is a UK-wide task force, and it is for companies of all shapes and sizes. So it's not just for the big players, it's not just for the City of London. In fact, arguably, we'd have failed in terms of what we're seeking to do if this is a London-centric thing. So this is very much UK-wide, which is why we're delighted to have the support of organisations like Santander, who obviously here in the UK have very much a UK-wide presence, and it's companies of all shapes and sizes. So we have, CEOs of membership bodies who represent, companies of all shapes and sizes across the sector, to make sure that we have that inclusivity in what we are doing. So that hopefully sort of sets the scene a little bit for the task force, why it was set up, how it is structured, how it is resourced, and ultimately what we are seeking to do by April 2022. So this time, in a year's time, we will be seeking to have launched this membership body, this safe space for organisations to become a part of, and then benefit from all the sharing and the insights and the data benchmarking that we can provide to enable organisations wherever you are on this journey, whether you're at the beginning of this journey or you're already part way along this journey, to support you on that journey to delivering greater socio-economic diversity. And we believe it is likely, and the first task force meeting is next month, and we believe it is likely we will be setting a public target, so an ambition for where we want to get to from that diversity point at senior level within this within the sector. So with that in mind, I'm going to hand over to Damien.
Oh, thanks so much, Simon. I think there's a slide, isn't there, Hannah, on the next one? Perfect. Thank you, Hannah. I wanted to come and share some insights on 4 key areas, and really to start off with by looking at why move the dial. And one of the things that was on my mind when we started off on the journey at Santander is, how do we create a movement and not a mandate to social mobility, but also how do we link it to our diversity and inclusion strategy as well. So I want to share a bit about that. And openly as well, we're still on a journey. We are laying, if you like, the foundations to our social mobility approach. One of the things that I'm really excited about with the task force is going to be the opportunity to have the industry and peer network to really help to shape that, but also to share best practice amongst different firms, but also at the same time to learn off other people as well, and how their progression is doing on this topic as well. I want to touch a bit on data, where we are with data, some of the thoughts around data, and also the collation of that data, and some of the things that I've found so far on the journey that we're on, and where we're up to with that. And then to touch on 2 kind of points really around progression and retention of social diverse employees, the enablers and barriers, and also a bit around mentoring and sponsorship. And hopefully you've all read the Bridge Group research, which came up with some key recommendations. There is some fantastic, there is a fantastic toolkit on the Social Mobility Commission website as well that's been published, which gives some really great actions on the left-hand side for basic, but also for progressing organisations as well. Let me start with why move the dial, and let me give some background to Santander. So our D&I strategy, we launched our last D&I strategy 4 years ago, and that really focused on diversity and inclusion, and mainly on diversity, mainly on representation, and mainly on actually looking at how do we ensure we're kind of looking at some of the areas to make an inclusive environment. We've been successful in that, and one of the things we've been successful in is that we've built representation across the organisation. So, for example, our gender numbers have increased, our Black, Asian, minority, ethnic leadership numbers have increased, but also we've also increased our disability numbers as well. One of the things though that's on my mind though is, how do we really take a lens around social mobility with this and look at the intersection of that part? And so what we've developed now is our next phase strategy to move to a culture of belonging. And how do we go from diversity to inclusion to belonging? And in the basic sense, belonging being, how do we create a culture where everyone and anyone can be psychologically safe to be their authentic and true self at work? And I think this links really nicely into the aim of the Bridge Group research, but also what we're trying to do here is, how do we create a culture where it's over the way someone can bring their true authentic selves to work and to be themselves. When we started off on the journey 2 years ago, a couple of things that I thought to myself was, actually, how do we create this movement on social mobility? And there were 3 key things that we started to help us do that. I think the first one is, like many people on the call now, you'll probably have ERGs or employee networks across the diversity strands. We've actually set up a social mobility ERG. And I think that was quite important, because what that's built is a critical mass of people who are passionate about the topic to really help us to drive it forward, but also to give us insights and help us to hear lived experiences across the organisation around social mobility. I think the second area that we kicked off as well to really put this movement in place was having an executive committee sponsor for social mobility. And John Collins is our sponsor, who is also one of the task force members and is our chief legal and regulatory officer as well. And actually, John chairs our social mobility steering committee that we hold each month, and really helps us to guide us around actually what are the areas we want to focus on in terms of our strategy linked to that. And I think the third area that we did as well was we took part in the social mobility index. And I think this is quite good as well, because what we found in our first year, we were in the top 75, we're in number 50. And then the last couple of years, we've been in the top 30. And what the social mobility index has given us is a benchmark actually around where are we against the key moments that matter on social mobility, and where do we need to really focus our energy, move the dial forward. And one of the things we found definitely from that is we're doing really well actually in our attraction at early years, for example, around our community work and our outreach work. But the gap for us still is around progression and retention and also data. And so that's where it's brought us now on to the point we're on now. And really for me, as the head of culture at Santander, I want to really look at what are the moments that matter to everyday inclusion across the organisation, and really look at these both through a social mobility lens, but also an intersectional lens across all diversity strands as well. So one of the things I thought about was, how do we get this journey to data, the why and the how, for collecting this? And we took part in the Bridge Group research, and you will have seen the findings in there. And we were one of the organisations, and we had just over 10% of our organisation complete the survey and the research in there. And we had some interesting findings from that. 44% of our colleagues are from a lower socio-economic background that we found of that 10%. But I was really cautious around, actually, that's just a representative sample of the data for the organisation of 23,000 people. So one of the things that's on my mind was, how can I really look at getting a good data set across the organisation? So this year, in our global engagement survey, actually, that we're holding in May and June, we're going to be asking, as part of the demographic questions, the one key question around parental occupation at the age of 14, which is the question that we also recommend as part of the task force, and to really look at the social mobility data. And with that, I think is going to give us an indication now, because we have generally between 80 to 85% people complete the social mobility survey, complete the global engagement survey, will hopefully give us a more robust data set. One of the things though that's on my mind though, openly, is we're going to get asked, why are you asking me this question? Is going to be the question that we're going to get asked openly. So one of the things that I'm doing at the moment is a really clear campaign, which links back to the social mobility network as well. So what the social mobility network has been doing over the last 2 years is being really creating a narrative and a really shared understanding across the organisation around what does social mobility mean? What does it mean for us as an organisation? And what are we trying to do to progress that as a bank? But also at the same time as well, I think as we come to this global engagement survey, I'm doing a really targeted campaign over the next few weeks around blogs, storytelling people across the organisation, but also bringing to life the work we're doing on the task force and working group as well, to really help people understand why we're asking this question. Because I think if we don't do that ahead, I think people are going to be really confused around why are you asking that question from me and what does this mean. So I would suggest as well thinking really hard about actually how do you create the narrative around the social mobility data set ahead of doing that part. And what my hope is then, when we have this robust data set for this year, is a few things that I want to do. The first thing that I want to do really is I want to really look at what are these moments that matter throughout the employee life cycle linked to the promotion and retention of colleagues, and looking at the data and what does that tell us at the moment. Actually, how are our colleagues progressing through the different social mobility background lenses, and also what does that mean in terms of progression. The second area that I really want to focus on is a regression back to the other diversity strands as well. So I really want to bring in the social mobility data to have a look at that through the gender, through a Black, Asian, minority ethnic lens, and through a disability lens, and through an LGBT plus lens as well, and to really have a look at what's the correlation of diversity data with social mobility data as well, and are we seeing any themes or any areas that are coming up, and as Simon said, what we found in the Bridge Group research, for example, is that there was a higher proportion of people who were from a Black background who weren't progressing in the same rate as those who were from a non-Black background. And so therefore, I think it's important that we really look at the regression to the diversity strands and identities as well, to understand really lived experiences across the organisation. I think the other area that we want to really look at in terms of our next steps as well is really looking at how we address some of the lived experiences by holding some qualitative focus groups as well. So I think it's all great that we have the data and the quantitative data that will give us from the Global Engagement Survey, but I also want to hear from colleagues as well around their experiences. And actually our Social Mobility Network, as one of our ERGs, has really helped us to do that over the last 2 years as well, because that's allowed us to listen to colleagues' experiences and also understand, are we taking the right actions to support that. One of the areas that is going to be important for me as well is actually the progression and retention, and what's the structural issues that we have in place at the moment for that. And the Bridge Group research gave us some really interesting findings in there. And what we found, the recommendations is definitely around how do we look at embedding leadership responsibilities and performance review processes, cascading that throughout the organisation. And also, how do we really look at fixing processes and not people, and really looking at reviewing and reforming dominant cultures and opaque processes. And one of the things that's on my mind is how do we look at, as I said, these moments that matter throughout the employee life cycle, particularly with a focus on promotion and retention, to really look at how we use that social mobility data set to look at progression rates, to look at how we're at attrition rates, to look at those areas that will really help us to understand, actually, are we seeing people progress and be retained at the same rate as those who might be from a higher socio-economic background as well. I've got other things that I'm looking to launch this year as well, which I'm really excited about as well, is we're going to look at launching a reverse mentoring piece for social mobility as well, which I think is important. So we're going to look at actually how do we have our leadership teams have a reverse mentoring relationship with those people who are from a lower socio-economic background, linked to progression and retention. One of the other areas as well that I want to focus on is sponsorship and sponsorship circles. And one of the things I think we might run the risk of is over mentoring under sponsoring. And I think we find that a little bit from gender, for example. And I'm bringing some of the learnings that I've taken from how we've increased our gender diversity numbers into the social mobility part as well, because I think there are some lessons we can take from that, particularly around what we've progressed throughout the last few years to this. But I think one of the areas for me definitely will be around sponsorship of key talent, and actually how we create that sponsorship structure in the organisation. So, I think my final point on this and the part of where I am is a couple of things, key takeaways. I think the first one for me is really thinking about creating this movement, not a mandate. How can you create a kind of mass of people in the organisation who are passionate about the topic, who will help you to understand lived experiences and really link the employee voice to the work that you might want to do in social mobility. The second area for me is, have you got the executive sponsor for this? Because I think that's really important to have that sponsorship at the top, and all of our diversity strands across Santander have an executive sponsor, and actually having this social mobility one has been really powerful to kind of progress the agenda. I think the third area for me on the data side is really looking at how you want to collect the data, using the parental occupation as the key measure of that, but also thinking about the education around the data. Do people understand why you're asking it? What's the reason why, and what's it going to inform, or what's it going to support? And I think my final area really, as I said, is around really looking at those moments that matter throughout progression and retention, for example, promotions, attrition, etc., through that lens, and using the data to really inform some data-driven choices around actually what are we seeing around social mobility in your organisation. And I think my final round with the narrative is just linking it back to your overall D&I strategy. Is actually how do you create those intersections across the other diversity strands. Hopefully it's giving you a flavour, Simon, and everyone around some of the thinking we've got in Santander at the moment, and what we're focused on, and hopefully what we'll get as well from the industry and peer network, some of the thinking we want to bring to that. But Simon, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, brilliant, Damien. Thank you very much. That was really useful insights into the journey you've been on so far, and some of the key areas that you're focusing on. And I'm sure a lot of that will have either chimed with what some of the people on this call are doing or looking to do, as well as giving them some really useful ideas, which is, going to be a really important part, I think, of what the task force is, the outputs from the task force are going to be, is to provide that place where people can, find out the learned experiences of others who've been on this journey. So I'm conscious of time, and there's lots we've got to get through. So just very quickly, before we go into the sort of breakout rooms where we can have that kind of peer discussion, Hannah, have there been any questions for us to pick up before we go into the peer discussions?
Yeah, it's just been a couple, but as you say, Simon, I'm sure we can go into more detail once in the breakout rooms. So one has been, how do we ensure that we get senior team / budget holder buy-in for leading this change?
That's a really good question, and this is one of the things that I reflected on when we started off the work to social mobility. And I think a couple of things that I draw on from this. I think firstly is having the executive sponsor in place for this, and I think the reason that's been so helpful and progressed the agenda is that actually John is really passionate about the topic, but also is a real driver for change across the organisation. So I think firstly having that in place. I think the second one for me as well is making a link as well back to the economic opportunity with this as well. So I think actually having an organisation that will attract but also progress talent in the organisation is one that will link back to our anyone's employer brand and EVP as well. And we also know, actually looking at progression and retention, we know when we look at key KPIs in an organisation, it's much cheaper to progress people internally than to hire people into the organisation. So I think actually understanding actually how you can really progress your internal talent already through the social mobility lens is a key aspect of a sell. And I think the third area for me that I draw on is making the link back to the D&I strategy and really being clear that social mobility is part of creating an inclusive environment, and actually focusing on this is a great way of a thread across all of the diversity strands, because actually social mobility is a lived experience for across all of them.
Yeah, thanks, Damien. Just to add to that, I think that's one of the reasons for that very good question about that kind of, senior level engagement and budget holder engagement. One of the reasons the task force has been structured in the way it is with the 3 work streams is to look at that. So you've got one, just as Damien talked about, which is the kind of the productivity now. So what's the business case for doing this? So work stream 3, that's exactly what it's doing. Work stream 1 is looking at that kind of industry consultation. So let's understand what's going on within the industry, what some of the perceived barriers are, and so on and so forth, which we're going to talk about in a moment, to really understand that, to help open the door so that you can get that buy-in that you need and that budget holder commitment that you need. And then finally, obviously the work stream that I'm the delivery partner for is then being that kind of place where organizations can come to get the support, to whether it's get the buy-in and get the budget holder buy-in that you need, or whether it's then having got that, okay, how do we get the data, just as Damien was talking about. So that's for all those reasons, that's led to why the task force has been structured in the way that it is, to give you the tools and the data and information that you need to get the things that we all know that we're going to need to then drive this change. Hannah, was there any others, or should we?
Yeah, I think that covered quite a lot of the ones that have come in, and I'm conscious of time. So Simon, do you want to talk us through how the breakout rooms will work, and then I can open them up?
Fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. So what we're really keen to discuss. So as I said, Damien will facilitate one of the groups, and I'll facilitate the other. And there are three things that I'd really be keen for us to share some thoughts and reflections on. All very much in line with this idea of safe space and kind of engaging with peers. What do you think some of the barriers are that currently exist to driving this change? And one of them, it feels like that last question, which is how do I get the buy-in that I need to drive it forward? So what are some of the barriers that exist? And what are the solutions to those barriers and the opportunities that it can address? So what are some of the opportunities that it's going to provide? And, Damien's just talked about one of the opportunities that this provides is that it's cheaper to progress existing talent than it is the cost to bring new talent in. So, what are some of the opportunities that this can do? And then finally, what are our hopes for this task force? I'm very aware there's all kinds of, if you look at the wider D&I agenda, there's all kinds of activity and things that you can be a part of. I'd be really keen to get a sense of what your hopes are for this task force. It's got significant backing from government and senior leaders across the sector. But what are your hopes for this task force? So those would be the three topics that I'm keen for us to discuss in the breakout in the next kind of 15 minutes or so. So Hannah, if you want to work your magic behind the scenes, we'll all reconvene back when this is done. So when we've done this session, we'll all come back, and what Damien and I will share is some of the themes that have come from our respective groups, so you can benefit from what everyone has talked about, not just what's obviously happened in your group. So I'll see my group in a moment or two.
Yeah, and I think some of the barriers that came out still probably what we heard was still around how do we really, if you like, get everyone engaged across the organisation on this topic from top to bottom, if you like, and probably more of a focus on the more senior levels on this piece. And one of the things we talked about is understanding and helping to shape the lived experience conversations across. And we heard from KPMG, from Letitia, around a really fantastic work they've been doing there around fair futures and actually profiling and storytelling around this piece, but not overtly talking about, I'm from a lower socioeconomic background, more of the story around who they are and it alludes to that, which I thought was quite powerful to hear the opportunity about anchoring something on this topic, which was good. The other opportunity I think we really talked about a little bit more at the end was around the social mobility network, the ERG, if you like, internally, but also linked to that, how we can also use the working group and advisory group and in the task force to help us to get that peer-to-peer relationship and talking about that and together in terms of that piece. And Letitia's just shared actually a link to the Fairer Futures at the bottom here. Thank you, Letitia. And I thought that was a really fantastic example of an anchor that we saw there from that piece. And I think I think one of the last ones that really came out for us again was around data and just making sure the opportunities for collation of data. And actually, I think Susie from DLA Piper shared around they're about to do some work on this shortly around that piece. And it's good to hear that other organisations or other people are starting to think about the data capture as well and how that would work. I think they're the main points. Susie, would you cover anything I've missed there? No, I think
you've covered everything there. Yeah.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you. Thanks, Damien, to your group for sharing what they did, and just pick up on some themes from the group that I facilitated. So there was a piece about, when we're talking about barriers, about this tackling of the dominant culture. And if that's not done, you're not going to build the sense of belonging, which I know is something, Damien, that you're increasingly starting to look at Santander. I think the importance of creating a safe environment where people don't feel so vulnerable to share. And there was another piece about this is such a big issue. It's we're all going to need a kind of start point or a place to focus that can make a difference. So helping organisations So as a solution to that, if there's a task force, we can be helping organisations with some, start points and things that they can do just to get some activity moving, rather than trying to boil the ocean and try and do it all in one fell swoop. Some of the things that were spoken about, take some learnings from what's happened when it comes to recruiting, in terms of making sure you've got a diverse recruitment panel, but doing the same with your promotion panel. So when you're looking at that promotion piece, to address that kind of fit piece, and also sort of linked to the data, understanding where the training budget is going. What types of individuals, what groups, what's the profile of where budget is being spent. And then we actually got a chance to talk a little bit about some of the hopes for this task force, and there was some really great things that came out there, and I just want to pick up on a couple of them. One is, there's a hope that the work that the task force does has a wider kind of social benefit in terms of creating a greater social cohesiveness, and people feeling less disenfranchised will be a really great sort of unintended consequence, to an extent, of this focus that we've got from a corporate perspective. Also, that the work we're doing in the task force can kind of blaze a trail for other industries to learn from. The challenges that we face are similar across lots of industries, so this ability to take some of the learnings from what we're doing here that can be used in other industries. And the other is the power of the collective, and how coming together can really help drive change, but also that learning you can get. And a comment was made about the Women in Finance Charter and the impact that has had, and I know already within the task force that that's one of the bodies, if you like, or that we're looking to learn from in terms of what's been done well there. So some really great stuff around hopes for what we're looking to do. So I hope you found that useful, and that share. We'll create a summary and share it with you all, so you've got the what we just talked about there. In terms of next steps, I know some of the organisations who are involved today have people within your business who are involved with the task force already. But if you're keen to either stay connected to what we're doing, or see if there's a way that you can get involved, please do reach out. This is we want to make sure that this is a fully financial and professional services wide initiative, and something that we're looking to drive. So please do get in touch. If you're keen to find ways where you can continue to either engage or just benefit from the work that we are doing, and don't be shy about that either. We've got a fantastic quantity of people who've put their hand up to give their time for this, and that's great. But I also recognize that we all have busy jobs, so if you just want to benefit from it, don't be ashamed by that at all. Don't feel you've got to volunteer and be involved to benefit from it. This is about supporting the whole sector. So do get in touch with myself from that point of view. If you want to obviously pick up on anything that Damien shared in terms of what they're doing at Santander, I know he'll be really keen to share, both because I know that's the kind of person he is, but also because I know the commitment that Santander have to the task force and what we're looking to do. So thank you for joining us today. We've finished a minute early, Fewy, but thank you. I hope you found that useful, and we'll look forward to continuing to engage with you and help you on this journey in your organisation to drive this change. So thanks all very much indeed for your time. And Hannah, from MyKindaFuture, big thank you for organising. Well done, you. Thank you all. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. It's great to meet you all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.